Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Forward Thinking. It's Chrissy and Charlie here. And today we're talking about why you need to beware of the Frankenstack.
So ominous.
Yeah, it's not Halloween, but we are talking about a Frankenstack. If some of you have heard of maybe that term before, it's kind of just a funny term to talk about a tech stack with too many tools hacked together. With no real like big picture in mind, or over time there's been so many people adding on to the tech stack that what you're left with is kind of a form that kind of fights against you and has a mind of its own. So we're gonna talk through why it's important to not create one, what are the implications, and also how you know if you have one, and then what you can do to prevent one. And so let's just dive straight into it. Charlie, do you want to take it away and say why it's important to not create a Frankenstack? But for those people too, sometimes they're inheriting one. But why is it important to not have one, really?
Yeah, and I think we've all got a bit of a Frankenstack at some stage of our journey, and
Yeah.
I think it's just the symptom of the environment today, where there's several thousand marketing technology platforms. All of them have their own special purpose, and we like to get a bit carried away and implement maybe more than we might need at some point. So, and yeah, you're right. A lot of people do inherit a tech stack. I mean, most people inherit tech stack these days. Not very rare you're going to be creating it from scratch. So there might be some tools in there that start making your tech stack look like a Frankenstack more than a nice working in harmony tech stack. So one of the important reasons not to create one, or to try and limit the creation of your Frankenstack, is it just plainly just wastes everyone's time.
Yeah.
It creates a lot of inefficiencies. We all know from having worked in marketing operations, when you start digging into stuff and you just go down that rabbit hole, right? You go, oh, there's something happened to this lead. What happened? And then you look at what happened to that lead, and you're like, oh wait, it got updated by an integration. And then you look at why it had to be updated by that integration. And it's because there was some other kind of order of operations thing about another integration that it needed to be able to be updated at that time. And then that caused maybe a sync error, or it triggered a process in Salesforce that you weren't aware of, that SalesOps just created. And then they needed to create that because there's another tool integrated into Salesforce.
You're already driving me crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll stop there. So the inefficiencies created is just a lot of time goes into troubleshooting, right? How much time is everyone spending just digging into things and figuring out why something happened?
Yeah. And I think after being this in almost 11 years now, I feel like more and more it's becoming complex and
Definitely
harder.
Worse, for sure.
It's worse. Systems playing nice with each other, it's hard in the best of times. So when you have, and with a few technologies working together, so when you have a ton going on, it's just without really thinking through how they should play with each other. Like you said, it wastes a lot of people's time. You're doing a lot of, why did this happen? Or even chasing timing issues. Timing issues is so hard to deal with. But
An order of operations,
it plays a big role.
And then because of that, you're wasting a lot of your time. You've probably got consultants, expensive consultants, that you're wasting their time, and you're spending budget on that. You might have to invest in other tech to deal with more problems and making it worse. So, not only is it and making all of what you're doing inefficient, and probably the whole marketing team more inefficient than they need to be, it's also wasting budget on trying to address these things too.
Totally.
And then one other important reason that a lot of people, I think, forget, and we talk about this a little bit on our podcast, is that the reliance on lead flow working properly is actually a huge, it's a big need for a business, right? Especially when we're looking today at kind of maybe ungating some things, giving people access to sales quickly, making sure sales can follow up, speed to lead, all of these things that people are focusing on these days. you can't have this Frankenstack of tools creating inefficiencies in that process, or drop-offs in that process, or holes where maybe a really high intent, high quality lead isn't even getting to sales because of the amalgamation of this Frankenstack is just creating issues in that lead flow.
Totally. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing here is, like you talk about, all of this plays a big role into making things harder and getting leads to sales was more important. But the issue that we talked about too is, like, the worse it gets, the harder it is to fix. And then, you can end up, in a place where, like, you are almost just ineffective, your marketing. Like, you have to actually, like, maybe even pull back everything in order to build everything up again. And that's a huge delay to all of your marketing and, execute on your marketing strategy. So
Totally. There's a tipping point, right? Where sometimes it can get so bad that it's almost impossible to fix because you'll never find the time to be able to fix how bad it is.
yeah.
And once you go over that, it's so hard to work your way back because you would almost have to stop all ongoing execution just to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can be bad.
Yeah. So obviously this is not a great place to be, but it's not that, it's not the end of the world. And we're going to talk about first, at least figuring out, how do you know if you have a Frankenstack,
So how do you?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing I think for us when we look at it is, like, rabbit holes. Like, do you just find yourself in a rabbit hole, like, every day, in activity logs, reports, is trying to, trace, like, what's happening? That probably means that you have a Frankenstack, or there's an issue with just, like, understanding what's going on, which is kind of like they come one and two together. But that's a big, big telltale sign. How many rabbit holes are you in? How much time are you spending doing that? One thing we talked about before too is, how much shelfware do you have? Like, how many tools? Can you even list out all the tools that you
Yeah, do you
have?
even know?
Do you even know? And actually, I was talking to a client yesterday, and that came up too. Like, there might be tools that, they're not even owning and other people are using. And
Or the owner's left and no one's owning it anymore.
exactly. So
That happens a
if
lot.
your tools have no owners, or the owners don't live in marketing ops, for whatever reason, I think that is something to look into too. Platform architecture, just how all these tools are integrated and work with each other, is, like, the number one place to look to. Um, and if you have a bunch of those processes set up by people that don't work there anymore, it's likely that there was no documentation left. So really is kind of now the chance to dig into it, do a lot of exploratory work, and diagnosis. So kind of the way we approach our health check, you need to go to kind of core areas. Um, so when you've kind of figured out if you have a
Well, yeah,
Frankenstein.
I guess you when you feel it,
Yeah, yeah. When you feel,
I think anyone listening to this, if none of that resonated with you, you probably don't have a Frankenstack. But I'm sure most people listening to this are like, oh yeah, that kind of like sounds like my day today, which
Yeah,
means we probably all have a bit of a Frankenstack, right? It's a spectrum. It's not
it's a
like you either
spectrum.
have one or you don't. It's everyone kind of has one, and it gets progressively worse. It can get progressively worse. It doesn't have to though.
Right, right, right. And so,
So what do you do if you have a Frankenstack?
yeah. Yeah. Well, the first thing that I've talked about is, a lot of this has to do with stuff that's already been put together, but you just don't know what's going on. So the first area we'd suggest is documenting, really putting some documentation in place. And this doesn't mean documenting where you want things to be. This means documenting what is going on right now. A great way to do that is by, taking a test lead or a few records that came in that day, and then looking in their activity log in your automation system of what happened to that record. And then also looking in your CRM, what are all the campaigns that went through? What are all the tools? Like, how was it created? Was it created from an API user? Was it created, through other ways? Like, these are all great places to document. One, like, where people entering the database from. We talked about this even with consent tracking. A lot of this lead processing, documentation of entry points, and being 100% sure on all of those entry points is super important.
Mm-hmm.
And
And just to jump in there, sorry.
Yeah.
I think the one really kind of practical way to get started with this, and we've talked about this before, is building that bird's eye view, right?
Yeah.
Think about, on the left, all of the different data acquisition sources, and then where are they coming into your marketing automation platform from? What is happening to them, like the key processes, like the life cycle, scoring, opt-in, standardization, all of these things. Go through, list them out, then list out, okay, how is that data then synced to Salesforce? What's happening in Salesforce? Lean data, is visible touch points being created, that kind of stuff, and try and get that bird's eye view. That's going to just let you know what tools you have, what are the big things I need to look at, what is the order of operations, how is leads flowing through the systems, and then once you've got that, you just zoom in to each functional area.
Yeah.
So you mentioned kind of like, life cycle. Like you could zoom into the life cycle. Okay, well, when a lead comes in, like do that test lead and see, okay, well, it gets picked up by this life cycle, it gets scored, it moves to MQL, it goes through these processes, maybe it gets enriched first, and then that creates the demographic score, and go through all of that, and then keep zooming in until you have a really good idea. And just the first image of just seeing all the tools and how they connect together in the bigger major processes, that's almost a game changer. When we've built that out for clients, they're like, oh shit, like, okay, I can kind of see what's going on here.
Yeah.
And then the zooming in bit can take a lot longer to get done, but as you start building it out, you just really understand what's going on. I would recommend anyone who inherits an instance or starts at a new company and that doesn't exist, just do it straight away, so you can really understand what's going on.
Totally. So you've done your documentation, you've documented your lead flow process. Now it's kind of, you have those areas that you've dug in a bit, where there might be issues. And I think that's key, documenting the issues that you find, and also documenting where are there rabbit holes, like where have you found even recently, cases. This might even be like issues that you've been sent, but thinking about, okay, where there might be cases where you're just like going down a path and finding an issue and another issue, and that might help you figure out even like a root cause.
And what you just said there as well is really a good point as well. Like a lot of times you kind of know what's going on because someone has complained about it before. So like sales, they say, oh, this lead didn't get the right status or didn't have the right data enriched on it, that kind of stuff. Like you could try and figure through, okay, was there an order of operations issue that's causing that? That's a good place to start for sure.
Yeah. And some of this could even be, brainstorming or whiteboarding, like all these different areas, like just going through. So you found those rabbit holes, and like you said, order of operations is super important. How is your order of operations creating a lot of these issues? Can you create more of control around the timing of processes, when they trigger, and how that plays friendly with some of your tools? We see that a lot with, even if you're doing auto conversion or lean data is picking up a lead and routing it. What are all the things that you need in place before that conversion happens or before the routing happens? That is an example of kind of order of operations. Otherwise, you'll have potential issues.
Right. And then kind of bringing it back to kind of your stack, right? As we're talking about all of these things, so many of these kind of processes within systems are reliant on integrations from other tools outside of systems. Like, your scoring is reliant on enrichment, probably, right? Or your lead flow is reliant on like a drift bot or a drift meeting book or like a Chili Piper or other tools that are pushing people through the funnel to sales.
Yeah.
So it's like there's going to be stuff with I think a Frankenstack to me can mean both lots of different tools and that is building out the Frankenstein, but also kind of like rogue processes and like within tools as well. Like it's kind of like you could almost have a Frankenstack if you only had Marketo, but it was just architected terribly, right?
Right.
So you look at both of those things and the dependencies between them.
Totally. And I think part of that too is if you're doing, this goes into a little bit of technical debt, but for certain processes that are happening, think about what needs to happen right away versus maybe even what things can happen a bit later or in batch,
Mm-hmm.
because that'll improve your overall processing time in general, especially in Marketo. When you have like a ton of campaigns someone has to run through, it'll just delay things even further.
And then I think you have to be frank with yourself about whether you can remove tools
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and certain processes that maybe were set up before your time and don't really have, need anymore. I think we talked about this on one episode about the sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
It's really hard to remove tools once you've sunk time and effort and budget into it, but you can't fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy
Mm-hmm.
and think that because you've put that time in, it's still worth it. So you have to be quite aggressive, I think, to really figure out what tools are still working for you and not. And when it comes up to renewal, if the tool's not working for you, you have to cut it, because it's just adding a lot of technical debt. It's adding a lot of time to maintain. None of these tools just work themselves, right? It's kind of like Bizzable. People think, oh, just turn on Bizzable, it's going to be fine. But there's a lot of maintenance that has to go on for every day. So because you have so many tools to maintain and keep going, it adds a ton of burden on any marketing operations person. So if you can remove tools, there is a huge opportunity to be able to free up time for the marketing operations person to be more focused in where there is providing value. We can't do all the things. We can't have all the tools. We have to be picky. And that's where, if you've inherited a Frankenstack, one of the best things you can do is like cut out your shelfware.
Totally. And I think there's a learning experience there. I think like if you spent loads of time in a relationship that ended up failing, like you still, yes, you wouldn't just stay in it because you've, dedicate all the time, but there is a learning experience. You figure out what works for your for your company, what doesn't, and also maybe what were the things that kind of put you into that using that tool or that situation that you can prevent. And so the next area I want to talk about is, how do you not create a Frankenstack, or how do you prevent things from getting worse if you feel like your company or your marketing ops, might be going down that path? In the first area, and we've talked about this a lot, the 3 Bs. So when you are taking on a new tool, it's really important to have the marketing ops team, but also just all the teams selecting these tools, keep 3 things in mind. And that's the budget. Do you have the budget to pay for this? How does that compare to your overall marketing budget as well? Because as cool as like some tools are to operationalize your marketing strategy, the money to actually execute like the actual marketing in your marketing strategy is most important, and it should be directly related to each other.
Like if you're spending more on measurement than you are on actual marketing activities to actually provide, to do stuff to measure, then that is not in balance, right?
No, exactly. And then the second is, do you have enough bodies to actually support it? So like Charlie said, these tools, although they have automation in the name, or they seem like they can just solve your problems, really you need someone to own it. And there's selling points that are being sold to you. But you need to be clear that like any tool requires people to maintain them. So if you have a team of 1 on your marketing ops team, your marketing tech stack should be pretty small because you need to be able to maintain it. And the last thing is you should build a case. So everyone needs to be on board on why this tool is coming on, bringing it on, who's going to support it, which is bodies. But also, are they all bought into that idea? Attribution's one we've always talked about, but if not everyone is clear on like why you're using that tool, what it's going to be used for, then it's less likely to have the adoption that it deserves. And then you end up with a tool that's not being used or being used incorrectly.
Yeah. And we actually have a new tech business case worksheet that we'll link to in the show notes. But some of the key sections in that are, one is gap analysis. So does this tool fill a gap in our existing stack? I can't tell you how many times I see duplicate tools, like you've got 3 ABM tools or like, a few automation tools like that. I mean, yes, I know all of these tools offer some kind of different flavor, but really, do you really, really need like another tool that does most of the same stuff that the other one does, and then adding on a ton of technical burden onto your marketing operations team?
Totally. Yeah.
So you've got to be a lot of the stuff just being like brutally honest with yourself, right? Like, is it really worth it?
Just Marie Kondoing everything. Like, does it spark joy, or
Right.
is it doing what it's meant to be doing? Then cut it out.
Yeah. And then again, yeah, if you're like looking forward to investing as well, that gap, like, are we actually filling a gap, or are we just doubling up?
Mhm.
Maturity analysis. Are we even ready?
Yeah.
You know, just because the last company you worked at had a very mature stack and team, when you go to your next company, it doesn't necessarily mean that that company is ready. Like, we do
Yeah.
see this a lot. Like, kind of, you move company and you just want the stack that you had before, so you will just, buy all the tools and get it going. But I think we need to be a bit more patient, understand where each company is and each individual in that company is at in terms of kind of their technical maturity and their ability to understand data, use data, and really kind of use the tools within the stack in an effective way. So being like, having patience, right? Are we ready? If we're not, again, being brutally honest, if we're not ready, it should wait.
Yeah.
And then fit analysis, right? Reading or due diligence. Is this going to integrate well with my existing stack? A lot of the tools, they're working hard on their integrations. They know they need to.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that they all are great at it, though.
No.
Right. So maybe speak to someone who's actually implemented that tool before, and see how, and it may be with a similar Slack to you, has it actually integrated well? Has there been any, issues they've had to troubleshoot over time with the integration? Because, tools are great, but like, if they're not all talking to each other well, and you're having to constantly troubleshoot issues within integrations, it's almost not worth it, right? Or if it doesn't have an integration, you're doing like list uploads. I mean, again, that's a lot of burden on whoever's gonna have to do it.
Yeah, totally.
I'm not saying you should never do that, but be careful about what you take on in terms of like whether it fits.
Yeah, that all comes down to the bodies part. Do you have someone who is willing to build all those custom integrations or be ready to fix it when it could break? Then fine. If that would be a burden on your team, then I'd probably rethink it.
Mm-hmm. And then just prioritization. We talk about this a lot with the roadmap and other things. Is it really, really, really a priority now? Like, have we actually evaluated the business impact? Have we run this through a prioritization framework? There's the good and bad thing about marketing operations is the good thing is there's pretty good job security. There's a lot of work to do, right?
A lot of work.
The bad thing is there's a lot of work to do.
Or all that work should have been done yesterday is more like,
right.
Yeah.
So you really have to prioritize, and because you just can't do it all. So, is implementing this tool really the highest priority? Or is maybe fixing your parts of your Frankenstack a better priority? And as you do start to address your Frankenstack, you will end up being able to scale your technologies, because you're adding them onto a secure foundation, as opposed to just kind of hodgepodge. So a lot of time fixing technical debt and fixing some of the issues within your tech stack is going to be the best bang for buck of your time,
Totally.
as opposed to building the new shiny objects, right? And kind of keep always looking forward and looking for the next thing.
Yeah. And I think part of that is then where you have to be a little bit influential on people and get them to understand. Because I think the teams that really need help understanding if a tool is priority are the people that aren't even implementing them, because a lot of these tools are, if you're in demand gen and you feel like, oh, I want to do more conversational marketing, let's take on a tool like Drift. That is something that maybe is an idea for them, but they might not, they don't have the idea at all of like, how much time does it take to implement? What are all the things that we need to prepare and think about beforehand? And so really you can act as the person that can help level set that, and say, and look at their goals. If one of their goals is, that's one of their biggest goals, and have them choose, hey, we can do this one project, but then that means these other things that you want to do might get delayed. But if that's your number one goal for your department, then we'll take that into consideration, then do our own prioritization. But also letting them understand, what that whole process could take is also something that you might have to do.
Totally. And being clear of that timeline, and sticking to it. The worst thing is if you've maybe, you've been convinced you want to add another tool to your stack, and then you just like lob it in there and you just don't really think about it, right? Mm-hmm. You got to really take your time to implement it properly. And that's where documentation comes in, right? Like, what are the downstream effects of adding this tool within this part of our stack? Mm-hmm. What are the dependencies, or what is the data that tool needs at the right time for when that tool is going to do whatever that tool is going to do? Yeah. So like, you have to, that's why that bird's eye view map is great, because you can be like, okay, I'm going to plug this tool in here, and this is all the stuff that's going to happen before that within our lead flow, or this is how that tool might have to interact with this tool in terms of like updating our data in Marketo in a certain order and things like that. Mm-hmm. So having that view, having your documentation is key, but then also, like you mentioned, making sure when you're implementing it, you have an implementation plan. You're not just turning it on and just like putting it in. And an example we see a lot is like, content syndication or something like that, or like some kind of lead creation tool mm-hmm. that's plugged into your marketing automation platform, but you haven't thought through things like, okay, am I scoring these leads from this channel? Am I are leads acquired from this going to be running through my opt-in processes properly? Yeah. Are we stamping lead source and any source information on this lead? How is it impacting, my attribution tool on the other side? Like, do I need to make sure that touch points are being created? Go on. You can go on and on and on and on. Mm-hmm. So you need to really think that through and build that into that implementation plan to make sure that you're implementing it properly, and it's not just another continuation of a Frankenstack.
Yeah, definitely. And this can be hard to do. We all know everyone's busy and you just want to check things off the list, but it'll save you time in the future. So your future self will be thanking you for that extra time. And part of the reason why you might be feeling busy is because you're spending 3 hours of your day in some of those rabbit holes. So it's all this kind of interconnected. It does have like a flywheel effect, where like we said, the more this happens, the faster it will create problems and so forth and so forth. So this is a great time to, make 2021 the year where you kind of take a step back and, fix some of these problems so that you're set up for success. And simplification, if anything, just feels necessary right now. And it can save you even budget and time, or you need to figure out resourcing if they want to continue on the path. So hopefully that was useful for everyone. If you have a Frankenstack, we wish you luck in taking control again of it. And if you have any more questions, feel free to ping us on LinkedIn. And if you like this episode, definitely share it with your employees, colleagues, friends, whoever. We greatly appreciate it. Yeah, Grandma she might fall asleep to it. She might not know. But yeah, we'll see you on the next episode of Forward Thinking. Have a good one.